I think Death Note is great. What an original opinion, I know, but it's true. There hasn't really ever been another show like it for me. It's an incredibly well-directed, smartly written, and exciting supernatural thriller, so I was pretty excited when I found out about Platinum End getting an anime adaptation, which is another manga made by the same creators. And then I watched it when it came out. What the fuck is this? Okay, let me say this right now. There are 4 episodes of the show out right now at the time of recording, and the first 3 were terrible. The 4th one was actually pretty good, so I acknowledge the fact that the show does get better, but at the beginning, I was pretty disappointed. Keep in mind that I had to wait a week for each episode, which made me more angry when each one inevitably turned out to be mediocre at best, until the 4th episode. And I know the argument that's gonna pop up when I put out this video. Well, of course you're gonna be let down. Think of what you're comparing this to. Do you really expect this to live up to the quality of Death Note? Let me tell you right now, I was preparing for disappointment already. I knew it wouldn't be as good as Death Note, okay? What do you think I am, some sort of psychopath? I mean, yeah, I guess I wouldn't be too mad if it didn't have the prestigious names attached to it. In fact, I'd think it was kind of funny. But the reality is that's not the deal here, alright? But there's a difference between an anime that's not as good as another, but it's still fun, and the huge drop in quality that all fans of Death Note will bear witness to while watching this. So let me explain the plot of this anime. We open on a scene of this guy who's about to commit suicide, but before he can fall to his death, he's saved by an angel. Afterwards, this angel, or Nase, tells him that she can make him happy by giving him wings that would let him fly anywhere, and a red arrow that will make anybody he shoots fall in love with him. She also tells him that he can use these tools to potentially become God, as accepting these powers makes him one of the 13 God candidates. Ultimately, our protagonist, Mirai, agrees to this deal and the rest of the anime happens. Now, right off the bat, you can immediately see the parallels. Supernatural elements and powers in an otherwise normal setting, the whole concept of the God candidates. The opening act actually shows a lot of potential, and then it goes into the main character's backstory, and that was the first sign that something was very wrong. Right off the bat, you can see the major differences between this guy and Light. He's a more sympathetic character, he has a tragic backstory, and overall, he's just not as interesting. It almost feels as though the writers were primarily focusing on making Mirai as different from Light as possible. Mirai's backstory seems rushed, it doesn't make me feel anything. You can tell that they're really going for that sad factor, but it's just too much. There's one scene in here that just perfectly sums up all of the problems with terrible cliched anime. It's a flashback of Mirai as a kid talking to his mom, and he hands her a shitty crayon drawing, and she reacts how any parent would, breaking into a monologue and explaining the components that make up the protagonist as a character. Who the fuck does this? Like, okay, I don't have kids, but if one day my son hands me a drawing that they made, I wouldn't just suddenly say, you know, I think everyone has a right to be happy. They didn't fucking ask. There isn't even some kind of cool lead-in. She just fucking says it out of nowhere. Jeez, at least have the decency to give context to your bullshit anime dialogue. It feels like the show's trying its hardest to establish the main character's mom as a good person, that she didn't deserve to die, that Mirai's life was a happy one, that he didn't deserve to have that taken away. But it pushes too far in that direction, and now all we have is a milquetoast, mediocre basis for our story. And I didn't even mention the fact that this guy gets abused by his aunt and uncle, and they also happen to be the ones who were behind his parents' death. Yeah, they really pulled that old nonsensical cliche. Another part of Mirai's past is a girl named Saki, a childhood friend of his, and she also turns out to be one of the God candidates. Actually, I should probably use this time to talk about how painful watching this anime is for me. And it's not because it's so bad that it physically pains me to watch it, okay? That's not what this is. It's the fact that it has so much potential that it doesn't capitalize on. The prime example of this is the ending of episode 2, where Mirai is about to start his first day in high school, and he sees an angel flying above the crowd of students. Angels can only be seen by God candidates, and at this point in the story, it would be bad for Mirai to be discovered by the other candidates for something that I'll mention later. So in order to stay safe, Mirai will need to fool this angel and pretend to be an ordinary high school student, thus starting an intense game of cat and mouse where the two engage in a battle of wits to pull the wool over each other's eyes. The whole setup is fucking great. I was actually kind of hyped for the next episode after seeing this. This whole scenario could have been the entire anime and it would have worked really well. If that's too much, then maybe just an arc. Either way, it's great, but then it's completely ruined by the start of episode 3, since Mirai immediately fucks up and reacts to something that he shouldn't have seen. At which point, he gets stabbed by a red red arrow in the back, and it turns out that Saki is the one who shot him. This could still be interesting. Having his identity exposed, now he has to try and avoid someone who he has a close connection with. It's just another opportunity to have a cool cat and mouse situation, but then that's also immediately ruined by the fact that Saki and her angel only did this to ask for Mirai's help and protection. And then it's followed up by this weird romance thing, and god damn it, it's like this show is actively trying to be as bland and uninteresting as possible. And it's around here that I start to have some real problems with the protagonist. He just comes off as a really boring person. And you can maybe chalk that up to him being under the influence of the red arrow, but even after the effect of the red arrow wears off, he's basically the same. They even make a joke about the lack of difference. He's just a standard good person who wants to have a standard life with his childhood crush. Even with these incredible powers, which could potentially let him do anything, you're telling me a kid with that kind of power, with the kind of emotional baggage that he had to deal with, wouldn't be tempted in the slightest to do something wrong? To do something to make his life a tiny bit better? To do something that's interesting or relatable? He can still be the same person. He doesn't need to be a criminal. I'm not saying make him light or anything, but do something, anything. Wasted potential aside, I also have a problem with how the show handles the rules of its world too. I'm not even gonna get started on how stupid it is that the show continuously forgets to disclose super important details to the viewers, so whenever these things come up in the anime, it feels like the show's just making shit up as it goes along. Like the white arrow, which is completely different from the red arrow since it can just kill people instead of making them fall in love with you. It would have been nice to know that before, right? Any rules that this show thinks it has either don't make any sense or aren't even kept track of for too long. Let's just start off with something simple, something that's not too big of a problem, but it's pretty funny to point out. In episode 2 of the anime, Nase explains that the red arrow can only be used on 14 people at the same time, and they can't be used on someone you already shot. This is contradicted later in the same episode when a mysterious Cape Crusader, we'll talk about him later, uses his red arrow to shoot at least 30 guys at the same time, and yet there isn't any problem with this. Consistency is key in shows like these. You need to stick to the rules that you yourself established, otherwise there are no guidelines or reliable references we can use to gauge what's a clever trick and what's an ass pull. But again, that's not really too big of a deal. It might just be a mistake with the animation, but something that grinds my gears way more than that is this intermission screen that's heavily reminiscent of the intermission screens of another anime that I've already mentioned several times in this video. It states that humans who have lost the will to live or who cannot find meaning in life are chosen to become god candidates. Let me say that again. The fate of the world is in the hands of these god candidates, candidates for the position of god, and what are they? A bunch of unmotivated, purposeless, and aimless people with no path or vision to follow. Why? Why are they chosen to be candidates for the incredibly important position of God? It's explained in episode 2 that the reason they're chosen to be God candidates is because people who try to commit suicide are dissatisfied with the way that the world is right now, which is not the case for all of them, and I don't even know if that's true for most, but if that is the case, it doesn't matter because people who have already lost the will to live are probably already so demoralized to the point that they wouldn't see the point in participating in this sort of event to become God and shape the world in their image, especially since after doing so, they wouldn't even be able to partake in the version of the world they sought out to create. And even if we're going with this kind of flimsy logic, there have to be other better candidates out there who haven't lost their will to live, but also see the world as unjust and unfair. And that type of person is probably better suited to take on the position as difficult and mentally taxing as God. If you can believe it, the show expands on this rule and somehow manages to make it even dumber. It's revealed in episode 3 that actually those who have been chosen to be a god candidate are all in Japan. This is because Japan has the highest suicide rates. You shouldn't even be picking god candidates based off of that, but even if you were to, why would you limit your options to one fucking country? That's totally a good idea. Less work for us. It's not like we need that wide a range of candidates to compete for the position of God. And it might seem like picking apart these logical fallacies is a nitpick, but it's totally a writing flaw. It's convenient for the author to have all of the God candidates in Japan so that he can have all the key players near each other and spice things up if necessary. Coming up with a half-baked reason like this to achieve that is, lazy. Oh yeah, and I haven't even talked about the context of the scene. So what happens is, actually, I need to bring up some more context. There's been this guy in white armor going around acting like a hero with his god candidate powers, and it's revealed that his true aim is to draw attention to himself and kill all of the other god candidates in order to become God. And he carries out the first step of his plan by announcing on live TV that he plans to kill all of the other god candidates. Surprisingly, nobody goes looking for a fight with him since they don't want to die, and then he goes on live television again and says, "I changed my mind, let's be friends." Oh yeah, like that'll work, buddy. I'm sure everyone watching is convinced that there's nothing going on here, so they'll definitely show up to the meeting place that you set up at the time that you decided on. It's fucking brilliant. I mean, shit, if this doesn't... Some of the god candidates actually showed up. You're here too? Why are you here? Why are both of you here? What is wrong with you people? Why doesn't anybody have even a fraction of common sense in this anime? The main character doesn't, the love interest doesn't, our villain doesn't. I don't even know what the point of his first live declaration of war was, since he just immediately takes it back before anything happens. You know, wouldn't it be better from a writing standpoint to just not do the first broadcast and instead make it so that his plan started out with him asking for peaceful negotiations between the god candidates? I mean, if something that you write into your story doesn't accomplish anything, then why do it? It would have given you more time to do other interesting things, and it probably would have made this a lot more convincing too. This way, at least some people would take his word at face value, and it would make more sense for the other god candidates to show up too. I mean, I seriously don't get it. What was the point? I miss Light. I miss Aizawa. I miss Soichiro Yagami. I even miss Matsuda. Fucking Matsuda. And of course, I miss L. I gotta talk about this because I think it's really taken for granted how great of a character L was. You see, most detective characters, at least from the anime and games that I've seen, fucking suck. They either A, come off as incompetent because the mystery that they're trying to solve is way too obvious, or B, pull everything out of their ass while hiding information from the viewer to artificially create a sense of awe in the audience. Both of these are terrible. It's actually really hard to write a character like this. It's hard to give off the impression that someone is genuinely smart, not just smart because the writers are telling you they are. So, for a character like L to even exist is so much more amazing than you guys think. Kira could literally be anyone in the world. So how the hell does L narrow the list of suspects with as little information as he has? That's what everybody is thinking in L and Light's first standoff, which is why the audience is just blown away by the fact that he was actually able to do it in a smart and convincing way, using clever tricks and reasonable logic to decipher the information gathered from those tricks. L and Light's first confrontation is one of the best scenes in the show, and it happens within the first 2 episodes. The concept of the Death Note is already a compelling and interesting enough hook as it is, but mixing in an incredibly smart opponent for the main character makes it that much more interesting. What I'm trying to say here is that Death Note does everything it can to get your attention at the beginning. Platinum End fails to do that. Thankfully, this isn't everything the show has to offer. It would be sad if it was, but it's not. Episode 4 actually managed to capture that Death Note magic. The scenario that played out here was built on a shaky foundation with all of the logical fallacies and stupidity of the characters involved, but ignoring what it took to get here, this was actually an engaging, intense, genuinely cool and methodical situation. It was suspenseful, the characters all got a sudden boost in intelligence, there were clever tricks that were being used, and it all felt surreal to experience this again. For the first time, Platinum End managed to not only remind me of Death Note, but also execute on its concepts like Death Note would. Hopefully the show continues this, and hopefully I don't hate myself while watching for the remainder of its episodes. That's all I wanted to say, and thanks for watching.